All right, welcome everybody. This is DVD number 3 for the season for nonviolence. You know, I'm Jonathan Jones, and as you can see, we got Arun with us today, and we have Bianca back with us also. So, I mean, we received some letters from Attica Correctional Facility, and what we're going to do in this DVD right here is we're going to answer the questions that they raised in those letters. So the first question, I want to put this question to you, Arun. This is from Marshawn Owens. How do you maintain and practice nonviolence in a violent environment?
Well, I think that is the most important time when we need to practice nonviolence, because if we get into a violent environment and we add our own violence to that environment, we are just increasing the violence, and it grows and multiplies like a virus. And then it gets out of hand. And that's basically what has happened to human societies today, that we have always responded to violence with more violence, and we have increased it to such an extent that now we think violence is the only way we can resolve any dispute at all. And to some extent, the governments have contributed to this, because when they can't come to an agreement to something, they get to declare wars and kill each other and destroy each other. And at the end of it, we find that we have not really resolved any issues at all. So it is important for us to understand that the basic principle of nonviolence is that we are not fighting an enemy, we are transforming a friend. When we have that mindset that our friend who is violent is going on the wrong path and we need to transform them, then you work out nonviolent ways of doing it. Now, in any society, whether it is a violent society or not, but you can't transform a person by catching him by the collar and saying, change, or otherwise, you're going to be beaten up or something. Then that way, nobody is going to learn anything and nobody is going to change. The only way you can change a person is by using a different tactic. If that person is violent, you are non-violent. If that person is angry and frustrated, you show love and respect. And that way, that person becomes aware and different and changes his attitude. So it's very important for us to keep this in mind, that we are not fighting an enemy. There are no enemies. We are trying to transform a friend. That is the fundamental principle of Gandhi's nonviolence. I want to share with you a story of his own experience when he was beaten up by the police because he was breaking the law. And he didn't shield himself, or he didn't protect himself. He said, okay, you want to beat me, go ahead and beat me. You can kill me, but you won't destroy my soul. And that's when that policeman realized that what am I doing? Here is a guy who's standing here and not protecting himself or not responding to my beating. And how can I beat him? And so he stopped beating him and gave up. So that requires a lot of moral strength. We get into a physical fight and we basically expose ourselves to all kinds of physical, um, hurt. We break our bones and God knows what happens, and or sometimes it goes to the extreme of we die. So violence is just as dangerous as being non-violence, but in non-violence, you are showing moral strength. You are showing that you are willing to die, but there is no cause for which you are willing to kill anyone. And that is that moral strength that we need to have in a non-violent atmosphere so that we can ultimately change the thing. Now, this is not to say that it's going to change overnight. Nothing happens overnight. We have to work at it because for so many centuries, we have created a culture of violence that has seeped so deeply in us that now everything about us is violent. Even our speech is violent. Our relationships are violent. Our, sports and entertainment and everything has become violent. So in that kind of violent culture, to change it to non-violence takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But we have to keep faith and continue to work towards creating that kind of peaceful society. And eventually it will happen. So Jonathan, you can share your experiences or your thoughts on this question. And we can also hear from Bianca.
Yes. So let me see. How do I maintain and practice nonviolence in a violent environment? Well, I mean, the streets are violent also, as a lot of you know. And so what I do is that, first of all, I'm not under influence of anything. I'm not high. I'm not drinking, because I definitely can't maintain no nonviolence if I'm under the influence of weed or alcohol. So I can't do that. And then like another thing is that, I stay grounded in my spirituality. So I mean, I meditate every morning. And so that right there is my way of like praying. So I would also suggest, like, if you have like a higher power, something that you believe in, stay like connected to that. I mean, like, pray every morning. If you're a Muslim, pray 5 times a day. That'll also keep you all grounded in nonviolence. And then also, I mean, if you see like conflict around you that could lead to violence, somebody really getting hurt, and you feel like safe and confident in yourself to intervene in that and to like squash that and to help squash that, then you could do that also. Because I've been in situations where I done seen conflict about to pop off, and I done like got involved in that. Because one thing I noticed is that if I'm around people that's fighting, then I may feel the sense that, man, maybe I should fight too, because I feel like I have to protect myself. But if I'm around 2 people and they're about to get into a fight, and then I like de-escalate that, like, hey man, like calm down, man. Y'all ain't got to, you know what, talk about this, man. Y'all ain't got to do it like that. And then by doing that, now there's no violence. I'm not getting caught up in anything. The situation is at least calmed at that moment. Then I could just walk away from that. Everybody could walk away from that. And I mean, and nobody will find themselves in a violent confrontation. So there's many other ways to practice nonviolent in a violent environment. But I tend to like look at something I read from Mahatma Gandhi also, when he just said that, you know what, don't worry about what nobody else does around you. If you stay committed to whatever it is that you believe in, if that right there is nonviolent, when you got the courage and the confidence to practice that, no matter what is going on around you, that right there, that example alone, brother, start like spreading out to others, man, to do the same. So I know it may be challenging. I know it may be difficult. And you may feel at times that, you know what, man, all this violence around me, I'm gonna just be violent too. No, just just be committed to the path of nonviolence, continue to walk that walk. And I believe that what you will see eventually is that the people around you will start practicing that walk also. I'll pass it over to you, Bianca.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Arun. Well, what I want to acknowledge and say to you, Marshawn, is first of all, thank you for sending that letter and opening yourself up to this question that I think really in the practice of nonviolence, in the principles, in the strategies, is something that I ask myself almost every day. And I feel you, and I'm so grateful that you shared this question with us and your story in some ways. And a part of me is super bummed that we can just sit all together and have a cup of coffee or tea and just have a dialogue about it. I feel like I'm responding to a huge question without being able to, have the back and forth and hear you. But what I want to say to it is, what sticks out for me in that question is, how do you maintain the practice of nonviolence? And because the environments that we are in, unfortunately, have always been violent all around us, no matter what structures or environments we're in, there's always violence to be found. And I feel like my gut wants to tell you that the how you already know. It seems like the how is out there. We know we have all the tools and skills to live a nonviolent full life. And the maintaining part for me is really, really important, because I feel like not to kind of repeat what Arun and Jonathan already said, but there's this saying that holding on to hate is like drinking poison, but expecting someone else to die from it. And I think about that with violence, that even if I'm frustrating and I have questions and doubts about nonviolence, and I feel hopeless in some way, or in grief or in pain or in disbelief, I feel like, the only form of resistance I can do for myself is to not drink the poison and be harmed by it myself, is at least that. And then find community, find friendship, find people around you that challenge you and keep in your growth, find people. We need each other, we need community. It's hard to do it all by yourself. So I'm gonna maybe pause here, because I know we have other questions too, but thank you, Marshawn, for asking this question, and I hope one of these days we get to continue the conversation here back. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and ask us the next question. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question is, and I'm gonna pass it then over to you, Arun, again. Okay. The next question is, what is the correct response for an individual who is being physically attacked through no fault of their own? So what is the correct response for that?
Well, that's a difficult situation. And, there's no easy answer to that question. But like I said earlier in the question that I answered was, we have to decide for ourselves, what do we want to do? If somebody is going down the wrong path, do we go down on the same path and destroy ourselves? Or do we move away from it and find a different path to go and it's not only save ourselves in the physical sense, but save ourselves in the moral sense also, that we become better human beings. Because the other path is that when you go down where everybody else is going, then you're just going to destroy yourself ultimately and not gain anything from it. So first of all, we have to build that kind of moral strength to decide that, I want my life to be something meaningful. I want not only for me, but for people around me. And then we have to take the steps to make that life meaningful. If we just live and say that I am what I am and you got to accept me as it is, we are not. We are not, a lump of clay without any shape or form and just exist from day to day. We are actually a lump of clay that is being molded into a beautiful work of art and statue. And we are the ones who mold that statue, not somebody else. But we are the ones who are molding that statue of ourselves, which ultimately becomes a beautiful piece of art there. So if we look at life in that perspective and begin to change our attitudes, begin to look at our weaknesses and transform those weaknesses into strengths, that is how we become better and we gain moral strength and power. And then eventually people will not attack you for no rhyme or reason. And, when people attack you, they are trying to provoke you into retaliating. And when you retaliate, they can crush you. And, very often we fall into that trap and we destroy ourselves there. So, and nobody gains anything from it. Only the person who has attacked you will say that, look, I'm strong, I beat him, I killed him and destroyed him. And what happens after that? It's just a no-win situation. But if we decide we are not going to let somebody else provoke our life or not let somebody else determine what our life is going to be, because we are masters of our own life and we have to decide what our life is going to be. So it's a challenge, but it is not impossible to achieve. It's something that we have to really work up that strength. And as I said earlier, because we have this whole culture of violence and the mindset that eye for an eye is the only justice, or it only makes everybody blind. It doesn't help anybody at all. So we've got to move away from that eye for an eye sense of justice and seek a better way of doing things. Jonathan, you have something to say?
Yes, so Sean Ryan, that is definitely a good question there. Going off of what Arun was saying is that I remember from my studying of the civil rights movement that they've done a lot of training, took a lot of classes, a lot of role plays to be able to handle being assaulted, spit on, pushed and hit without responding in violence, because they felt that that would like hurt the movement. But I'm gonna tell you something, I haven't really went through that training. So, I mean, it's hard for me to like to respond to being attacked, without doing any, without trying to protect myself. So what throws me off about your question, Sean, is that, I don't know if there's a correct way. I think the correct way is going off of what Arun was saying, is that a correct way would be don't respond back with violence. So that right there would be the correct way. But if you haven't went through that training, if you don't have that mindset, you're not grounded in nonviolence like that, then I would suggest that, you protect yourself. And protecting yourself, you can do that in different ways. You could run. I mean, hey, you're protecting yourself. You're getting up out of there. You could run, but let's say you can't run nowhere because it's like a confined area. And then you could just protect yourself, man. I mean, and then if that right there might mean that you may have to like hold the person down, swing a couple of punches to throw the person off, to back the person up off you, then I would suggest that you do that. But see, protecting yourself is different to me than actually like doing somebody violent. All you're really trying to do, I believe, when you're protecting yourself, is stopping this person from like harming you. You're trying to make sure like, no, I'm not gonna just let you just, take advantage of me and harm me. So I'm gonna protect myself. But that doesn't mean, and then whatever protect yourself means to you, that's how you can respond to the situation. But again, I don't know if there's a correct way or a right way, but I do know that if somebody like attacks me, I do want to defend myself without getting hurt. But then at the same time, I'm like, I don't really want to hurt this person. I just want the person to stop trying to hurt me. So whatever that's going to take to get that person to stop hurting me, that's what I'm going to do. And hopefully it's not going to take me like trying to beat the guy down to a pulp, picking up something and hitting. And I don't think it's going to take all that. I think it's going to just take me just responding to a way that's going to protect me and let this person know that, listen, I'm not going to just let you just run all over me and just try to harm me without me doing anything in return. How about you, Bianca? What would you do in a situation like that?
Thank you, Jonathan and Arun. And thank you, Sean Ryan, for this question. It is a good one. I agree with what you said, Jonathan. I'm also questioning if there's a correct way. But what I do think is that there are many more ways than we think. Because, we've been so conditioned and taught about violence that it is actually entertaining and that it is pleasurable. And just look at our media and our entertainment industry and the movies that we watched. It is entertaining to think about, oh, there's a hero and there's a villain, and the villain needs to be punished, and then someone loses, someone wins, end of story. And I feel like there's so many more alternatives out there that we are not being taught. We don't feel like it's entertaining to think about, oh, we could actually heal one another instead of, harm one another, and find that entertaining. And I think now when it comes to physical attack and the danger, of course, again, what's the correct way? There's so many levels and so many situations and so many, it's hard to have a generalized response to it. But I think, yeah, there are de-escalation tactics. There's like going into the gym and training your muscles. There's different weights, and you can learn how to respond in an argument that is nonviolent. You can up until, okay, I'm physically attacked, how I'm going to respond to that. But I think because we are not conditioned and trained to respond that way, it's literally a new skill we have to learn. And the good news is there are a lot of skills out there. And yeah, that's, I think, what I would say to this right now. But yeah, also want to acknowledge that hurt people. And if you're being physically attacked for no fault on your own without any provocation, that's trauma and that's traumatic. And I'd like to believe I know what I would do. And at the same time, I'm a human being. And I maybe fall to the levels of the systems that I've been raised in. So yeah, it's about training. It's about learning and prepping yourself for it and sticking to your values and be really disciplined. It takes a lot of courage. Like Jonathan said in our last, I think in our first video, you really reminded us that nonviolence is a courageous act. Okay, so our next question comes from, I think, Edwards. And Edwards is asking, how can I help influence people to practice nonviolence and to take off their masks so they can be their true selves? That's, I think, a really beautiful question. In general, I think that I like that you said influence, because I think you can only really have control over your own actions and behaviors and not really change anyone else's behaviors and actions. However, influence is another story. And I think how I would answer the question is by modeling it and doing it yourself. Like if I model how to be my true self, how to be vulnerable, how to be true to myself, how to live as best as I can in alignment with my values, and also, show my struggles, be vulnerable about the things and the mistakes that I make, and making up for mistakes, because that's as human as it gets. Yeah, I think by modeling it yourself, I think you inspire and plant way more seeds than you ever will know, probably sometimes. And it's something that you say, Arun, all the time that inspires me, that you you plant seeds of nonviolence. And how it's being grown and what it grows is up to us and ourselves. So yeah, I think that's how I would answer this question. And yeah, Arun, what do you think about this question? What's your response to it?
Yeah, I agree with you. And, one of the most famous quotes from Gandhi was, "We have to live what we want others to learn." We can't just talk about it and teach them without living it and showing it in our own lives. So if we believe in something and if we live it and people see it and they get influenced by it and change them. So live what you want people to learn. That's the best way. Jonathan, you want to say something?
Yes, yes. So thank you, Edwards, for this question. I mean, the first thing that stands out to me is like true self, because I think of that as that I know a lot of people, and I at one time thought that, my nature or my true nature was to be violent, but I no longer believe that. I believe that my true nature is to be non-violent, and I have been conditioned and taught to be violent. I have been conditioned and taught to respond to like conflict or to handle problems in a violent way. And that's not my true self. So I just want to acknowledge that, man, that trying to show people to trying to like remind people that know your true self is actually non-violent and not violent. That right there is a challenge, but I'm happy that you are trying to undertake that challenge. And one of the things that I would suggest is that you share stories of because from reading your letter, I see that you walk in that non-violent path and all that. So share stories about incidences where you done just practice like non-violence. And then, just continue to just share stories. And then by sharing stories, that's what human beings do. That's how we pass down the knowledge to each other, is by just sharing stories. And then as you share the stories, and we tend to like exaggerate about the violence. You know what I'm talking about. I know you done heard some stories up in there where brothers talk about they done beat like 5 people up at one time with their hands tied behind their back. Not those stories, but talk about how you done had a conflict and you resolved it in a nonviolent way, and then just share like what values of yours that was exemplified in that story. And I think by doing that, that right there will stay with the people that you're trying to like show them a different way of living. Those stories will stay with those people. So now when they go on to another cell block, when they go on to another jail, when they even come home to the streets, they will remember those stories that Edwards done told them. That, yeah, I remember he told me about this story, how this situation happened and he dealt with this situation in a nonviolent way. And these were the values and the principles that he's been living by. And that right there is one way to, that's one way to like get the message of nonviolence out so that people could see it in like real life, practical ways on how to use it, rather than just reading it from a book or something like that. And that's the one thing I like about reading books about Gandhi, reading books about Martin Luther King Jr., because they showed you, they share stories of how they use the principles and the practices of nonviolence in like real life situations. So that could be another way you could do it too. Just direct people and nudge people towards like books to read that, from Gandhi and King that talk about nonviolence. So I want to thank Marshawn Owens, Sean Ryan, and Edwards for like the beautiful questions, man, that you guys asked us. And I also want to thank all the people at Attica, Craigstill Facility, Groveland Craigstill Facility, Collins Craigstill Facility that's practicing the season nonviolence 2022. This concludes DVD number 3. We got one more coming at you. That's going to be the conclusion. But until then, brothers, keep on practicing and living a nonviolent lifestyle.